Greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is still doing well. Welcome to tonight's second bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, the merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nedolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second bonus, shall we? A lady named Justine and her 17-year-old son Corey. Now, they live in a very remote and small town called Willow, Alaska. So small that it literally is like a huge swath of land with like 2,000 people. Their property butts up to an area called Independence Mine State Park. We're not deep in Alaska, but you know, it is the last frontier state. So you have Nelchina, the public use area, which is another state-owned land area where hunting and fishing, it's not a state park, it's actually just public use. It's state land that the public has use to. Really crazy. If you think about it, you are essentially coming right up from Canada and Washington, and you're right there. But it is so rural, like 2,000 people. Insane. Their experiences were quite interesting and very. If I lived in a area where they live, I would honestly be thinking about moving to a little bit more populated area, to be honest, because Justine really honestly, her comment to me during the conversation after Corey had got off the phone, she said it's only a matter of time before one of us meets our fate by one of these creatures out here. So like, and I said, well, have you ever thought about moving? And she said, yes, I have thought about moving, but you know, this is our home. And I agree. You know, I've got friends that live in Louisiana that live in hurricane country, you know, and get hit by a hurricane every couple of years, have to rebuild. People in California live in fire country, you know, so it's understandable, you know. But her husband is a truck driver, long haul truck driver through the state of Alaska, hunter, fisherman, hunts so he can feed his family and such. Food and groceries are very expensive up there. Many of you who don't know, it's insanely expensive to live in Alaska. I mean, I thought New York was expensive. No, Alaska has all states beat. Right, so being that Gary is a long haul truck driver, If they lived in the lower 48, they would be fairly well off. But because of the cost of everything being pretty much tripled compared to even in New York. And New York is very expensive, one of the most expensive states to live in the lower 48. Things are tripled, so a majority of their money goes to food and clothing, whatever they need, they get. But they do recoup by hunting, trapping, and fishing. And they also, Gary has family that, Justine is not originally from Alaska. She's actually from Washington State. And Gary and her met at college. She had gone up there and stayed with him at his family's home, which is also in Willow, and fell in love with the area, obviously married Gary, and the rest is history. Now, Gary, being that he is from up there, has family that lives up there. So even though it is population 2,000, it's give or take a little more, but it is spread out through this large kind of incorporated area. And but he has cousins and his brother all kind of live in and around them as well. His best friend, first cousin, his property also butts up to that Independence Mine State Park. His brother lives just a little further down, but they go hunting together when the law allows it. And they will go to the Nalchina public use area. And it is state land, very large swath of mountains. It's rugged. It really is a rugged, hard area. All of Alaska is, if you really think about it. Living in Alaska is a tough life. Even living in Anchorage, Fairbanks, it's just a tough kind of life. It takes a certain kind of person to live in Alaska. And they have seen some very interesting and strange things on top of seeing your basic everyday, every kind of Alaskan day, wild animals, bear, grizzly, they've moose, wolves, all kinds of smaller critters. But he's had his kind of run-ins with other things. Corey, their son, was on the phone with Justine and me for a little bit to kind of verify some of the things, because he had witnessed the experience that she had contacted me about was his and his cousin and one of their friends. There's a group of like 5 kids. But back to Gary, he's with his cousin and brother, and they are hunting in the Nalchina public use land. They come upon what at first they almost mistook for kind of like a snowdrift, or just like an anomaly. They saw what they know now as very large footprints. And they did not, what threw them off was there was kind of no toes visible. So whatever left these footprints had needlecraft. Now, the length of these footprints were something like 34 to 36 inches in length. Just enormous. That, if you really think about height to people's feet, and all feet are different. I wear like a size 11, so my foot's about 12 and a half inches long. That I'm 6 foot. So mathematically breaking it down, that would put whatever created these tracks, and it wasn't just 2, it wasn't 1, it was, they literally followed them for quite some time. But like I said, they mistook them for kind of just an anomaly. At first they thought possibly a snowdrift, some sort of snow had dropped off tree branches and whatnot, until they realized, holy cow, look at how these things, it's got like a very large stride, and you can tell one foot is always in front of the other, so they kind of were a little put off. But it would put something a foot that large, I would guesstimate 15 to 18 feet in height, maybe a little bigger, maybe a little smaller, but from what I could gather, because I tried to use Google to mathematically figure out, hey, if my feet is 12 inches and I'm 6 foot, would that put someone with a 36 or 36 inch footprint at somewhere between 15 to 18 feet? Now, that is huge. That is 3 feet. 3 foot footprint. And like I said, they followed it for a while, and always one foot was in front of the other, and just huge strides. Where they had followed it to, they came across about 5 or 6 elk, just torn apart, ragdolled. Really not a sight that he would ever want to see again. Just flesh, blood, bone. He did touch the carcasses to make sure that they were not warm, because you touch, it's warm. Oh, that's fresh. Let's get out of here. I mean, why they followed the tracks in the first place, I don't know, but interesting that they did, because they wouldn't have been able to really have a conclusion or an understanding of what was going on. They'd just kind of be baffled. So they immediately turned back around after they found this small herd of elk, just really torn apart. But if you really think theoretically about the size of those feet, that is something obviously just huge. They didn't bear witness to this thing. There was no noise. It was just, they came across it by accident. Like I said, in the initial very beginning of seeing it, they mistook it until they started to look, they saw how large it was. And one of them probably said, hey, looks like a footprint. And as you look through the woods, you see just a large stride, and them walking. Stride was something like 13 and a half feet, which is enormous. I mean, just huge. So they finished their hunt and call it a day. That's just some of the, one of the things that they've witnessed out there. As young kids, they used to, Gary and his brothers they used to go fishing, and there's a kind of like a large stream that is on his mom and dad's property. But Justine had told me this, and being from the lower 48, she had never heard or experienced anything. Obviously, you know, Washington has its own paranormal and cryptid stuff, but nothing could have prepared her for what she... And they've lived here, they've been married for quite some time, obviously. Corey's 17. So, they once had a bear, which was disemboweled, put on their roof. They didn't hear anything. They didn't hear a noise. They didn't hear it getting flung up onto their roof. They didn't hear any kind of animal-like screams or anything. Gary had woke up and kind of got out to go on a haul. Gets in his rig. His rig sits up a little higher than an average car, and is looking at his house, you know, prepping for the long couple of days. And there's just a huge bear on their roof. And he's like, that wasn't there yesterday. How the hell did we not hear that thing get tossed up on our roof, and why? And there was no footprints or foot tracks or any kind of prints around their home. So it was almost like it had fallen out of the sky or materialized on the roof. Just no tracks. That really shook Gary, because he went back in and looked at Justine and handed her a firearm. Corey was not 17. He was about 14 when this occurred, and said, you know, here's my shotgun. It's, you know, 12 gauge shotgun. It'll do some damage. Just protect your mother and your other sibling. That was just the norm. They never figured out how that got on their roof. To this day, they never figured out. Now, with that and all of that being said, Justine's experience that she wanted to share was her son Corey, her other son, who is underage, so he's real young, and a few cousins and one of their friends had been out in the backyard. They had been playing manhunt, and like I said, their property butts up to a large state park, and that state park, then you go more north and you have the Melchina public use area. So if you're in your backyard and you have all of that, think about how dense and deep that is. They're playing manhunt, so they're hiding in the woods right off their property line. So their woods are always alive. They're playing in the woods. Their yard butts up to the wood line. They go in the woods. It's something that they do all the time. There was one time they had been playing out in the yard, and there had been a lot of commotion in the woods. Her two boys come running into the house because they weren't playing manhunt, but they were playing pretty close to the wood line. And they come flying into the house. There's something out there. There's something, out in the woods. It sounded like a monster. It was huge, and it was making a strange noise at us. And Gary had gone out onto the deck and looked out. He didn't bring a rifle or anything with him. He grew up here as well, you know, so he's just, what do you mean monster? Sure enough, it's a freaking moose that comes meandering out, you know, and the noise they were hearing was it snorting, and it's, you know, just casually walks through their yard and goes into the next patch of woods just beyond their house. And, you know, so these boys and their friends are used to hearing their woods be alive with life. So they're just doing their thing. Justine gets a really bad feeling. She kind of looks out her window. She sees her nephew and the friend, and they're kind of standing on the wood line, kind of looking into the woods. They're not going into the woods at all. And she's kind of like, okay, you know, and she keeps doing her thing, making dinner for them all. And she looks again and she's like, where are the kids? You know, I've got 2, but there's 3 other ones out in the woods. Where are they? You know, and her two sons and her other nephew are not visible. And clearly the other 2, the friend and the other nephew, are just kind of standing, looking into the woods, you know, peeking in, like, baffled. Why aren't they going in the woods looking for it? They always go into the woods. That's part of the game of manhunt. You don't just stand on the wood line and say, hey, come out. You know, you go in and search for your friends. So she shakes her head and taps on the window. The 2, her nephew and their good friend, kind of hears that tapping and jumps, you know, and looks at her through the window, and she puts the window down and she yells out, where's the boys? Go and get them. You know, what's going on? Why aren't you out in the woods? And, you know, they say something, she can't hear them because she's inside. They're a clip away. So she goes out onto the deck and she's like, boys! She yells for them to come. And she hears her youngest son scream like something like, Mom, help us. Something's out here with us, help us. And the best friend comes running up. Her nephew's standing at the wood line, still looking in. And the friend says, you know, Justine, there's something out in the woods. We can hear Corey and the other 2. We can't see them. They keep saying that something's out in the woods with them. And we have no idea what to do. And she says, all right, hang on. She goes inside and she comes walking out. She gets to the wood line and she kind of peeks in at where they're looking. And she sees movement into, you know, in through the forest. And she's like, boys, what else? I mean, what do you thinking? It's her kid or her nephew. And she instantly hears her youngest son, Mom, something's out here. Something's out here with us. You gotta help us. You gotta help us. Get us out of here. And she's like, okay, hang on. And she's like, what do you mean? Is there a wolf, a moose? What do you mean? What are you talking about? You know? And they just say, Mom, you gotta help us. Something's out here with us. You gotta help us. And it was an exact like tone replica of that initial voice she heard. And she looks again because now she's like, and she looks and she's just starting to walk into the wood line. She gets 3-4 trees deep into the wood line, And her nephew, the one that was standing out, grabbed her wrist. And Aunt Justine, they're here, right here. Look, here they are. And her two sons, I'm getting goosebumps. Her two sons and her nephew, her other nephew's brother, come walking out of the woods on this side. And they are pale white. And she looks at them and looks back. And she goes, "Boys, what are you doing?" And she looks at her sons and I have goosebumps on my back because when she told me this, her sons are standing right next to her. And Mom, something's out here with us. You gotta help us. And she just stops. She looks at him and she motions to the house. And all five head to the house. And she takes that last peek into the woods. And once again, she sees movement. But she had seen movement go in one direction. Now she sees it going in the opposite direction. Kind of like where it had come from. And she can hear, snaps and breaks of little, scrub branches and shit. And she turns around and just starts running to her house. Like, immediately. Dead run. They get inside. She locks the door. She checks that window by the kitchen. And she shuts it tight, because she had left that open because she was worried about her kids. The kids are all kind of sitting in the kitchen / living room area. Their house it's all kind of open. Her father-in-law is a builder. He builds homes for a living up there. And strangely enough, there's a lot of people that, even though the prices are high and, there's a lot of wealthy people that will, not strangely enough, because, if I ever, won the lotto or whatever, I probably would want to move away from population. But the wealthy do buy property up there and they build some pretty nice friggin' houses, some, $1 million homes on large acreage of land. And that's what her father-in-law and her husband's brother does. Father-in-law's business. Gary just kind of opted out of doing the family business, but their house is beautiful. She sent me a picture of inside and outside of their land is huge. They've got a big chunk of land. But being that he is a master carpenter and, they had actually used like scrap lumber to build Gary and Justine's home and his other son's home, her father-in-law. So they're kind of all sitting in this kitchen living room area, and pale white, her two sons and the one nephew that was out there with them are truly the ones, that are just, they're not saying a word. They're just kind of sitting there looking at each other and just not speaking. The nephew, the one that grabbed her arm, just walks in and, "Aunt Justine, what do you think that was? What was that? What was that noise? Who was saying that?" And she's like, "I don't know." She goes, "I don't know, but let me figure this out." She's like, "I gotta figure this out." And she goes, "Boys, I'm gonna call your father." And he's on a haul, he's on a long haul. So she gives him a call, and she's aware of some of the things that, obviously she's aware of that bear carcass being on their on their roof, with no tracks around their home, no tracks in their yard. She's aware of these large 36-inch, 3-foot footprints that appear to have some sort of foot covering, not barefoot, but some sort of covering on them. She's heard the local native lore of the Otter Man, but where those woods back up, there is no kind of water out there. So any experience I've ever heard and read about in Alaska with the Otter Man, usually it's right in the vicinity of water. So she's trying to just figure it out. Maybe there's some kind of freaking sicko out there. And she gets in touch with Gary, and she's, he's happy to hear from her. And then she springs this shit on him, and, he's like, I'm turning around now, I'll drop this trailer off at a truck stop. I'll come back home real quick, and I'll pick it up in a day or two and finish the haul. And she's like, no, we're okay. She's like, Corey knows how to, shoot a shotgun. I've got, we've got weapons. We're well prepared in this house, obviously, Gary. Just finish your haul. But have you ever heard? And he's like, what did he sound like? What did he sound like? He says. And her response was, our youngest son, while he was standing right next to me looking at me. And he just goes, I need to come home. And, he's a day or two away. She's like, just finish and get back as fast as possible. We'll be okay. She's like, I'll call your brother. I've got his 2 kids here right now anyway. I'll call him and see, if he's ever heard anything like this. All right, call me if anything goes crazy, and just get in touch with my brother. So she calls Gary's brother. Gary's brother, I'll be right there. Don't go outside. Keep the kids inside. Are the kids accounted for? And once again, that same question. What did he sound like? And she says, like your nephew. And your 2 sons and my 2 sons and their friend were standing right next to me. They had just come out of the woods opposite side of where they were, whatever that was out there. I haven't talked to the kids yet. Just get here, please. Be right there. At this point, Corey now comes out. First time he's even spoke since they've been in the house. And they're only in the house for 10 minutes max. 2 phone calls. Doors locked, everything. His first words is, do you think that thing is what threw the bear on the roof, Mom? And she goes, what thing? And she goes, and Corey looks at her and he said, it looked like a human, but it was naked. And it was real skinny. She goes, and he goes, there was a few of them with it, but they were running strangely. They were running in different directions, and they were running crisscross, and they were very fast. But do you think that's what threw the bear on the house? He goes, I don't think so, though. He goes, because they were so skinny. He goes, I don't think they've eaten in ever. And she's taken back because she goes, how many? They? What do you mean they, bud? What do you mean they? And her nephew, the one that was out there, comes out and he goes, I seen 6 at least. He goes, I seen 6. He goes, they were coming at us. And then when you yelled, they stopped and ran back toward where that voice was. He goes, but I saw them coming through the trees, Aunt Justine. They were running through the trees like, he said, and I've never seen anything run like that. He said, they ran like a kid that was messed up. Different word, obviously, not messed up on drugs or alcohol, but you know how kids are. And she said, don't say that, like, but so they were just like, were they running at you guys? And they were coming towards us, but how they were moving, it was so odd. Like, they would just like cut through a tree area and then go back the other way and then cut back through. And it was like, instead of coming straight at us, they would take the long way and make it longer. And she goes, 6. And the nephew again then says, well, that's what I saw, but there's a couple more over by where whatever that was made that noise was, copying my cousin, the youngest of the boys. And she just sits down. She sits down and she calls her youngest son and she says, come here, because he's crying. He's in tears. He's the youngest. Corey is like 14, 15 at this time. He's 17 now. So the youngest was like 11, 12. And she looks at the friend and she goes, are you okay? Complete blanking out. He's on his cell phone. He already called his dad. He's like, my dad's coming to get me, Justine. I'm sorry. He goes, I'm sorry, but I made a mess. And she's like, are you okay, honey? Like, what do you mean? And because they're inconsolable. They're freaking in shock. And she looks at him and she goes, what do you mean? And he goes, I peed my pants. And they all kind of look at him. And no one says anything. You've got 4 other boys there. And that's how terrified they are. That, boys are cruel and kids are cruel. You got a friend that pees their pants at that age, you're going to get ridiculed. That's how terrified they were. And she said, okay, well, when's your dad coming? And he's on his way? Yeah, he's on his way. She goes, all right, go in the bathroom, get him some pants, get him some sweatpants, let him change, and just throw your clothes on the washer. I'll wash them. They get done. They go, the friends kind of go that way. And she's still got the youngest sitting. Her nephews are sitting on the couch looking into the kitchen. And the youngest is just like, Mom, these things aren't real. And she goes, what do you mean aren't real? And she goes, they're not, or he goes, they're not real. They look like UFO people, but they were meaner looking. They looked like monsters. And he said, he goes, they got really close to me at one point. And then when you yelled is when they took off running, but they hissed, they made this weird hiss. And they had these just big, weird looking eyes, Mom. She goes, I couldn't see their eyeballs. And she just, obviously, your son's in terror, so you're going to hug him tighter. And as she's hugging him tight, he makes this kind of weird noise. So she thinks she, heard him. She goes, I thought I heard him. She goes, I hugged him so tight because I'd just seen my son's best friend, who I've known for practically his entire life. I've got my nephews both my sons, and I'm trying to console my littlest, and I must, she goes, I thought I heard him. And she goes, I kind of let go, and she goes, are you okay? And he's staring at the window that she had opened and had, thank God, shut and locked, because, mind you, they've only been in the house, like I said, 10, 12 minutes. There's a face staring right into that window. That thing is on their deck. I literally have cold chills on my spine because how she said it. She said this thing was soulless. She said, I looked at its eyes. It was just black pits. She goes, I couldn't see an eyeball, but it obviously could see. She goes, it could see us. She goes, it had teeth that were just these ragged looking sharp teeth. Not like a canine, but almost similar to that of a alligator's tooth or some sort of lizard's teeth, just very sharp in a lot of them and strangely positioned. As she's looking at this thing, she kind of like that. Her two nephews scream out loud, and she turns her son to don't look. Corey hears the two boys scream, comes running out, and sees it. He stops dead in his tracks and turns around and goes back into the area that he had just come from. This thing hisses so loud through the window you could hear it like it was 4 feet away from you and there was no wall and no window. And drops out of sight. And then you hear pitter-patter walking multiple feet on their wooden deck and now on their roof, the back part of their house. So when her brother-in-law pulls in, he's not going to be able to see the deck or that back part of the house as how their home is built. This is like an extension kind of almost, but not. So their home's peaks are very strange. It's got a couple of weird kind of peaks and gables. And you can hear it just on that one part of the roof, like above them. Where the bear had been placed was in the front part of the house and higher up than this area. It's like a 8 to 10 foot from the deck up to the roof height. But out front, you're 20, 30 feet at some points. It's a pretty, very interesting, beautiful house. Like I love Adirondack houses and cabins and stuff. This is a very interesting and beautiful home. And just very interestingly cut up to where almost if someone did pull in, they couldn't see. And if they did get out of their vehicle and walk to the back of the house, they would be a target without even knowing. So she stands up and looks out the window and she sees them, and they're not small. They are small in stature, but they are very tall and they're hunched over, and how they're running, they're very odd looking. Not in the woods, but on this deck, and she sees one like jump off of the roof, and it hit the ground and like landed almost like a cat would. Like it didn't land bipedally, it landed quadruped, kind of hunched back up and turned and looked into the window and ran off their deck back into the woods. Once that one did what that just did, all the others just followed it. And she's looking out and she's like in shock. She looks at her two nephews and she said, "Take the phone and call your father and tell him to come to the front door, not to go to the back, that whatever was in the woods just was on our deck." How she described them is they were a very emaciated looking creature. Their eyes were soulless. They had these very alligatorish looking teeth, but longer. Much longer than an alligator jaw would be. But still strangely placed. It just, nothing about it looked natural. Even with humans, when there are birth defects with our teeth, it almost follows a pattern, but these were just not normal. The boys get a hold of their dad. Their dad is walking in the front door as they speak. He just hammered ass over to their house. He walks in, and as he's walking in, looks at his sons, looks at Justine. "Are you all okay?" And he sees that, Justine's standing by the window looking out the window, but now she's turned to look at him. And he quickly walks over to see what she's looking at, because the last he knew, there was some sort of guy in their woods mimicking his nephew. He sees 2 or 3 of these things go into the woods and lets out, "Oh, what the hell is that?" Corey comes walking out, best friend with him, and he's got his shotgun in hand, he's got his mom's pistol in hand, and he's got a rifle. So he's literally 3 guns in his hand and puts them all on the table. He's obviously Gary, his uncle. He's brought up gun safety. He did not carry them with any kind of misuse at all. He laid them down properly, took the precautions and everything, and looked at his uncle and said, "We should probably get him. We should probably shoot one of them, right? Right?" And his uncle shakes his head, no. Let's figure out what's going on. Pack your bag. We'll go to our house for the night, and we'll figure this out. And he looks at his kids and his nephew's kids' good friend, and he says, "Are you okay, buddy?" And he's just standing there kind of, "Yeah, I'm okay. My dad's coming." Their dad is good friends with, Gary and his brother. The uncle, "Pack up, we'll go to our house." Looks at Corey, put the guns away. Come on. We're going to our house. You'll be fine tonight. We'll figure this all out. He's in shock now because he's just trying to figure out what he saw. And the doorbell rings. Their son's best friend runs to the front door, opens the front door, and nothing's there. Nothing is there. And he kind of peeks out and looks, and he kind of just shakes his head, and he turns to look at Justine and the kids and the uncle, and he turns and looks and he goes, "My dad isn't here, but..." And the uncle just screams, "Shut the goddamn door, shut the goddamn door." And he turns to look, and hanging from the roof And like I said, the roof in the front is different. This thing hanging off the side of the roof, looking at him, looking into the house. And its long arm, its arm is huge. You know, these things are like 7 feet in height. Arm about that length stretches out and reaches for the doorbell and door. The boy is 2-3 feet away from being grabbed, and he slams the door shut, and the doorbell rings again and again and again. And the uncle is like, what the hell? He's like, behind us? He goes, do you see any behind us? No. And he looks at the best friend of the boys. Call your dad. See if your dad's got his hunting rifle on him. See if your dad's got his pistol on him. Call him. Call him now. Calls his dad. His dad answers. I'll be right there, bud. I'm right down the road. I'll be pulling in about a minute and a half. Her brother-in-law yells out, when you pull in, whatever is out there is in the front now. He goes, we got a couple out back in the wood line. He goes, it's starting to get dark out. He goes, but this thing is out on the front. He goes, whatever you do, don't get out of your truck. And if you do you have your pistol or rifle with you? He goes, I always have it with me. He goes, all right. He goes, I'm going to have the kids and myself and Justine back away from the area, back away from the front door, that one entrance. If you have to take a shot, shoot the goddamn thing. Shoot it off the roof. Don't miss. You can hear his truck pull in. Big diesel freaking truck pulls in. And as the truck stops, you hear the truck stop. And he's got one of those train horns. He had put one of those train horns in because Gary, her husband, and his brother, and all the guys, all kind of got a deal, bunch of train horns to put in their truck or their trucks when they're driving, and something comes in front of them, a moose, a bear, whatever's in the road. Multiple times in Alaska, they'll just come right across as you're driving. They can hit that and scare whatever is in the road away pretty quick. You hear that freaking train horn go off, and you hear running over the roof. You don't hear a shot because he didn't take a shot. What you hear is running over the roof, and you hear this thud that on the deck. It was louder than the first one that hit the deck via that porch. Justine and her brother-in-law look out of that window, and there it is, cat-like, it landed cat-like, quadruped. It turns and looks into the woods, stands up, and this one is not big. It's bigger than the other ones. It was less emaciated, and it was a tad taller. It gets up, looks into the woods, and jumps from the deck over the banister. The deck is about 7-8 feet in the air, because how their home is built. They're they're on a hill and on an incline. This thing just jumps, sprints, just boom, right over. Lands again in the yard, cat-like, and runs. Not bipedal, but ran quadruped, and it looked like it ran like that naturally. They all look at each other, and you're coming to my house tonight, she says. We're going to my house. Calls up the best friend, stay in your truck. if you see anything, my truck's out there too. I'm going to get Justine and the boys into my truck. I'll bring your son over to you. Just stay right there. If anything comes out or comes at us, put it down. They all load up into the trucks. No, they're not spotted again. They double checked, triple checked. They all run out to the truck. The best friend's dad is standing outside of his truck. He's got his pistol out and ready to fire. Justine's brother-in-law has one of his brother's rifles in his hand. Justine's got her pistol. Corey does not have his shotgun, and he was mad about that. He's like, I wanted to take a shot. He goes, I wanted to shoot one. When I was talking to him. They get in the truck and they go to his house, the uncle's house. All the boys as they're driving, all the boys break down, literally just start crying. That's a part when Corey got off the phone. Justine was adamant about how powerful this fear was in those boys, because when they were in the house, you could tell they were all scared, but they were not crying. But as they're driving to safety, they just break down. So terribly detrimental to these poor kids. Doors are locked. Everything is, she was prepping dinner and stuff. Everything's off. And they leave. And she calls Gary. Gary's already dropped the trailer off at a truck stop. He's contacted his company that he works for and states, hey, there's a family emergency. I got to get home. I'm going to leave the trailer at this truck stop for a day or two. I'll be out to get it. It's not any kind of food, produce, or anything. He's hauling oil in like one of those gas or natural gas, not natural gas, but gas trucks. So he can leave it for a day, maybe two. Truck stop is well maintained, well monitored. And all right, he's on his way. They say, we're going to your brother's, Gary. Whatever this was, just we'll tell you when you get here. So they drive, they're there. Sometime early morning, the kids did end up falling asleep. They had dinner. This best friend's at his house with his dad and mom. 2 nephews, her 2 sons, have dinner. They calm down. And they're so overwhelmed by the stress and the terror that they just instantly, go into the kids' room and pass out. Their adrenaline was huge, and then it dumped, and they're out like lights. Gary pulls in, did this trip that should have taken him, somewhere between 24 hours. He did it in about 6 hours less than. So he hauled ass. Gets to the house, looks at his family, looks at his brother. Thank you. Brother kind of explains to him what was seen, what he witnessed, what the kids are saying matches up perfectly to what I had, seen. It almost got their best friend at the front door. This thing rang their doorbell. How did it know that? How did it know to ring the doorbell? Except that it was stalking. It watched them ring the doorbell. It learned as it watched and stalked this family. It learned certain things. So Gary checks on his family. And he's like, I'm going home. I want to see, make sure the house is okay. Make sure it's still standing. And it's his famous kind of last words. Not last words, but he says it all the time on things, when the kids mess something up. Is the house still standing? Justine said, I want to come with you. Just in case. I'll bring, my pistol. I'll bring yours, whatever. I want to check it out too. It's my house too. Can we leave the boys here? Absolutely. They're still in the room. They literally got up, went to the bathroom, got a snack, and then went back into their room and fell asleep again. The two brothers, the two nephews. Well, two sets of brothers. So, brother-in-law, go check it out. If you need me, I'm 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. Just check it out. They pull into their yard half expecting to see their house destroyed. Front door's intact. They go up to the door. Gary's going to walk around the house. Justine opens the door, warns him, don't, just come through the house, just in case those things are out there. And you get attacked or ambushed. I can't get to you in time. Let's just go through the front. They do. Shuts the door. They're standing in the foyer, looking into the kitchen, living room area. And that window that creature had looked at her at is intact and locked. Door intact and locked. It's very strange. And then as they open the door, or as Gary opens the door, he opens the door and stops kind of mid on the deck. And lying there on the deck is one of these creatures. Just kind of really torn up real badly. Strangely enough, its blood had a purplish hue to it. Clearly there was some red, but there was some blue as well, because the oxygen, whatever. But it was like a very strange purplish hue to it. He flips it over, looks at its teeth, because he's like, he's a hunter. He knows, he's traps, hunts, fishes. He looks to see if another one of these things did these bite wounds. These bite wounds are uniform. These claw marks are huge. He's already kind of figured out that it wasn't another one of that species because of the claw size and stuff. Teeth are not uniform, just like Justine explained, like an alligator just stuffed in there. He looks at Justine and says, all right, I'm going to move it down by the wood line, toss it in the woods a little bit. We'll burn it tomorrow. I'll pick up a metal barrel tomorrow, and that's where we'll burn it instead of in the yard. And they get up the next day. They get their kids. The kids are home. They're in shock. Corey is especially just... Gary, the next day, gets that burning barrel. Kids are occupied. They don't want to leave their room. They're just hanging out and playing video games, which evident, kids aren't going to want to do something after like that happened. So they never had another one of these experiences at their house, and they never figured out what. Strangely enough, the bear body and this body, the mutilation on both, the damage caused, was so similar. Like this fingertip to this fingertip. Very similar. Still a little off, but still. He gets the barrel, burns it, and to this day, A couple years later, they have never seen any of those creatures in the woods. They still don't know what did that. I said, well, do you think? And I stopped. I said, I never heard of Willow, Alaska, but I mean, has anyone ever seen a Dogman out that way? And no. There has been, just outside of Anchorage, though. I think what happened was quite possibly a Dogman hunted and tracked these things down. Obviously, they didn't go deep into the woods, but I guarantee if they did, they'd find more bodies. I think a Dogman tossed that body up onto that roof, too. So, just a terrifying, crazy. I was getting cold chills the way she described it. I'm sitting there just listening to her. I got her on speaker and I got my phone right in front of me and I'm like, holy shit. All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.